most of the stuff that we're going to be seeing today cannot really be appreciated from one leaf. When it's possible to appreciate something with one leaf, I'm going to show it to you. But most of these are ones that we will walk up upon. A couple things to say. I promised you last week a audio recording of your tour through Claremont, and I just struggled with that, mostly because it was a rough week. I had power outages and all kinds of things that got right in the middle of me getting things together. But that video for that audio for Claremont is almost done, and it will be posted tomorrow. Okay, so you'll have 2 weeks if you want to go. I'm also trying to put together a Google Earth presentation for the Huntington. I think it would be helpful for you to know, if you are planning on going, and I will give you credit for going, it'd be helpful for you to know what we see in these different areas. And so it's not going to be a step-by-step a description, but I'm going to tell you where to find these certain things. Like, I was looking at the map today, trying to kind of segment a piece of it out. And I will be able to say, look, in the palm garden, you'll be able to see this, this, and this. These are up towards the top. These are more down towards the bottom. I'll describe them for you. And that palm garden thing might be a little bit of a wild goose chase, finding everything, but it might be fun. Who knows? I'm gonna give it my best and get all of the audios and everything done tomorrow. So you'll have 2 weeks to go to Claremont or go to the Huntington and look at this stuff. Excuse me. So that's my big goal tomorrow, other than a couple of meetings, is to make sure that that's all there for you guys so you can go see these things in person. Now, the week before finals, if you guys are going to be turning in your pictures of you in front of trees, that's when you're going to be doing that. Isn't that what we decided on? The week before finals, you would turn those in to me. So that means that 40 pictures of you in front of trees, you'll want to make sure that you do that for me by the next time we meet, which is 2 weeks away. Okay. So now what we'll do is we'll get started with, let's see. Mm-hmm. Okay, so we're going to jump by Quercus robur, which is the first one on our list, and we're going to go to Phytolacca dioica, another really fun name to say, by the way, as you're going about your day. Phytolacca dioica. This is the ombu tree. This is from Brazil, South America, Argentina, mostly Argentina. On the upper, what do they call it? Where all the, the cowboys, there's some upper plains that are kind of somewhat barren as far as not having lots and lots of rainfall, but there's lots of grasslands for grazing and that kind of thing. I'm thinking of the gauchos. That's, I guess, what I'm thinking of. But this tree exists there, and so the first thing we want to talk about, this tree can get upwards of 60, 80 feet tall, but it takes a long time. And a few kind of things that I'll show you when we see the pictures is that this tree does not make wood. It has this phenomenon called amylogous thickening, which is where it just kind of gets thicker and thicker and thicker, but it doesn't put on wood that has lignin and cellulose the way we would typically think of wood, which makes it very, very difficult to grow a big, tall trunk. So what it really is just a big kind of mound of, like a big round mound at the base with lots of shoots that come up from that mound. So you'll see pictures of it. It's a very strange looking tree. The gauchos, you would use these as markers in their big open grazing areas and sleep under them at night. They are dioecious, which means there's either a male or a female. There's two homes for the flowers. What we have here is a picture of actual female, and the female has the persistent fruits that you would look for. Two things I want to talk about while we've got this up here on the dock cam. First of all, this leaf looks like a taco shell to me. Okay, it's always folded like this. It doesn't do it at night. It's always kind of folded. Now, I don't know if this is for water conservation, but I always, describe this leaf as being like a taco shell. So when you lay it down, it lays down on its side, and you may or may not agree with my description because taco shells don't have a point. You get the idea. It's just the fact that it always seems to be slightly folded. Okay. So it's a dark green here and then a lighter green underneath, and we're seeing mostly underneath on this guy. And I've got it this way because I want you guys to see the cluster of little fruits. Now these little fruits look like those little miniature pumpkins, that you buy in the market. They really do, and they get oranger and as time goes by. So they start out green, get yellow, and finally will get softer and kind of an orange color and actually look like those little mini pumpkins. Not a deep or bright orange, but a yellow orange color. Okay, so that's the female fruits. Okay, so there's one up in the Huntington Gardens that is over 100 years old. It has a sign on it. It's very worthwhile to check it out because it looks like it's kind of from another world. My first year at the Huntington, we took some of these fruits and I put them in my pocket. I shouldn't share all of this with you in case you have a grudge against me, but I did, and we grew ombus on, and some of them turned out to be female and some turned out to be males of the prodigy that we grew on. So we have two good sized ones that are almost, I'd say 15 to 20 feet tall, over not too far from the horticulture garden lab where the garden plots are. They're starting to become impressive. So that's kind of neat. So that's the Phytolacca dioica, the ombu tree. Doesn't actually make wood. It just kind of creates this big kind of woody mound with a lot of stalks that come up from it. So we'll see pictures of that. Okay, Ceteris atlantica glauca. Okay.
Hey, Rick.
Yes.
What was that called again? You said the trunk expands?
Amylogous thickening.
Amylogous. All right.
Amylogous thickening. It's a very strange phenomenon.
Yeah, sounds interesting.
Yeah. Yeah. So, in fact, when you go to prune this thing, Joe said, hey, we had to prune the ombu trees the other day because they had kind of, the branches had kind of grown close to the ground, and there was actually some homeless guy living in between the two trees, And so they had to go out and quickly prune it. But I said, well, that wasn't too much work, because when you saw through the branch that might be this big around, it's just like sawing through butter. Since it doesn't have wood, the saw goes right through it. Okay.
Imagining them pulling up with like chainsaws, like heavy duty.
Yeah, yeah. It's so easy. You don't even, it's really quick. So, in fact, it's a great tree to teach students the 3-part cut, where you do a little undercut first and then cut off the majority of the branch to keep it from tearing down, because you can do an impressive branch very quickly without them having to break a sweat. So it's kind of nice. Okay, so we have Cedrus atlantica glauca, the blue Atlas cedar. This is from the Atlas Mountains, and it's somewhat related to Cedrus atlantica. It's a variety of Cedrus atlantica. The distinctive difference is that it has silvery, kind of grayish needles on it. So it's a true cedar, and a true cedar has little clumps of needles that come from one central point, instead of having the needles radiating around a stem. These little tufts, I guess you would call them, of needles. We saw Cedrus deodara, and this is, and then I told you while I was out looking for examples for you to drive by, I stopped at a couple, and they turned out to be Cedrus atlantica, which look a lot like in color to Cedrus deodara, but the needles are short, like these are, shorter. So this one will definitely, you'll be able to tell because of the color of the needles. It's distinctive. So glauca means white, and so that would be your characteristic there. So this one has been around a while, and in fact there are several varieties of this. There's one that's dwarf. There's one that has a really twisty, turny bark. There's one that's pendulous, that everything hangs straight down. So this has been one that they have kind of manipulated over time and created lots of different varieties of Cedrus atlantica glauca. But this is what it looks like. Okay. The difference between Cedrus atlantica and Cedrus deodara is that Cedrus atlantica has upsweeping branch tips instead of nodding at the very tip. So everything seems to stay upright and stiff at the ends and not drooping at the ends. Okay. Okay. Okay, this is a little bit ridiculous, but this is the smallest of the phoenix palms. And so I'm gonna start at the tip, and we're gonna go all the way. And this is about a 3.5 foot long frond. And as I get to the end, I want you to see something that's a common characteristic amongst all of the phoenix palms. So we're jumping way down the list here to Phoenix robellini, and that's the pygmy date palm. And Phoenix robellini is the smallest of the date palms, gets about 6 to 10 feet tall max. What I really wanted to show you though was all Phoenix, the whole genus of Phoenix, and that's Phoenix dactylifera, Phoenix canariensis, Phoenix reclinata. All of the Phoenix palms have these spines at the base of the frond just before it hits the stem. And these spines are nasty. You do not want to come in contact with them. And on the larger palms, the spines are more significant. And this being the smallest, you can see how significant these are. So it's just something that, you know, whenever you see a palm frond and you see these spines, it should give you a little bit of a clue. It could be a phoenix, okay? So this one, Phoenix robelini, is from Laos, the country of Laos by Vietnam. And like I said, 6 to 10 feet tall. It's a single feather palm. Now, we'll go into this in more depth in the PowerPoint. So, but bear with me. I'm just going to give you a brief definition. When we talk about palms, okay, these are the 4 distinctions. There's 4 different distinctions, okay? Is it a single palm, which means it's one trunk? Or is it a clumping palm, which means that it will send up more from its base, okay? Single or clumping. Or is it a fan palm, which kind of looks like a roundish kind of a frond that looks like a fan that you would be fanning a king with, right? Is it a fan palm, or is it a feather palm, which has a long plumose or plume-like frond to it, okay? So this is a feather palm, and it's a single palm. And that's what I'll be saying with all of the palms, okay? It's a feather palm, and it's a single palm, just one trunk, and then the frond is a feather. It's a long, like the feather of a feather pen or a ostrich feather or whatever, okay? So this is the only one that I've brought in that's in the Phoenix genus. Okay, so now we're down to Rhapis, the Rhapis palms, which are the only other ones that I'm able to get inside the house. Okay, so we're going to start with Rhapis excelsa. Okay, so here we go. We're starting with the tip. Okay, so very thin stem. Okay, and I'm going to bring it in here like this. Okay, so this is a fan palm. Okay, now when we describe this one, even though I just told you, is it single or is it multi-trunked? Is it feather or is it fan? These Rhapis palms kind of find their way in the middle a little bit. They're actually a caning palm, which means they send these upright canes, and then these fronds come out of those canes. And so it's a clumper because it sends new canes as time goes by, and the clump actually gets a little larger as time goes by. But instead of having trunks, it has kind of canes that are about maybe an inch in diameter. So these are from China. Both Rhapis excelsa and Rhapis humilis are from China. This is one of the most popular indoor plants there is. So you see them in large containers inside of shopping malls and big buildings and hotels and that kind of thing, because it's lush, it's tough as nails, it's rugged, it can handle a little overwatering or a little underwatering. It isn't real particular about the type of water you put on, because sometimes interior plants are really sensitive to things like fluoride in the water and stuff like that. So it's a pretty tough plant. But what I want to do is make sure you can tell this one from Rhapis humilis. So this is Rhapis excelsa. This is the lady palm, and here's how you tell. The fingers that come out of this fan-like palm are relatively sparse. In other words, there's space in between. You can see that in between here, there's a bit of space. There's space in between here, here, here. As far as how many fingers, well, sometimes you'll see 8 fingers, 10 fingers, but there's quite a bit of space in between those fingers or those spaces. Also, I want you to notice that this is pleated. So it actually, you know, has this kind of goes up, this goes down, this goes up, this goes down. And here's the big, this is the big thing here. If you were to pull this frond down to the end, I want you guys to see the end of this and have it be kind of clear. You guys see how there's a blunt end on this frond? Okay. I always think of it and have since I first learned this poem, it looks like the end was cut with pinking shears. And I don't know, probably some of you that sew or have seen people sew have heard about pinking shears. Pinking shears, when you cut them, it makes a zigzag pattern, okay? And it's just because it's a pleated finger, and then when it always has a blunt end to it. And this one might even show it a little bit more. You see how there's a blunt end to it, okay? So Rhapis excelsa is the more common. They both get up to be about 12 to 15 feet tall in their tallest form. They're both equally as attractive, I think. But this one you'll see on a 10-to-1 ratio over Rhapis humilis. They're slow growing. This one is much faster growing, or I mean slightly faster growing, to be accurate, slightly faster growing than Rhapis humilis. But it seems to be the most rugged and less prone to problems. And so that's why we see this one in the interior plant industry so much more than the other. Okay, so that's Rhapis excelsa. Now I'm going to show you Rhapis humilis. So here's the frond again, or the stem. And as we bring it across here, I'm hoping you guys see that there's many more, but much more slender fingers on this fan. Do you guys see that? So that instead of maybe having 10 fingers, we're talking about probably more than that. So many more fingers, and look at how they come to a point. Do you guys see that? Even though there's a little bit of tip burn on the points, there's not that blunt end, okay? So, you know, I mean, you can probably find fault with that description, and maybe it sounds like I'm kind of going over the top, but you know, in a heartbeat, these two things, this blunt end and finer texture, are the ways that we tell these two apart. So this is Rhapis humilis, called the rattan palm. And the way I remembered it when I was a student was rattan. You know, I think about rattan chairs and how they're very tightly woven, and this seems like the fingers are more tightly together, and so that just kind of all made sense to me. So, you know, it is what it is. I'll show you the pictures. And when I describe at the Huntington, there's this really one spot that I always drag the whole class to see, where in a breezeway between two museum buildings, there's a couple of statues, and it's very elegant in between this, in this breezeway, and they have a big old pot, and then on each side of that breezeway, in one of them is Rhapis excelsa, and one of them is Rhapis humilis. And so I drag everybody all over there just to see this, because I want them to see it. But I know it was probably unintentional. They probably just got the wrong palm in there, but it turned out that way. So anyway, here's Rhapis humilis. Less common, and probably a little bit more delicate. Okay, gosh, I don't know what to do here. So I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to do a stop share, and I'm going to go here to my virtual background. And I'm going to go here. Okay. You guys can see me, right? Okay. Don't look around at my office, please, because it's the Wild West in here. Okay, so this is Bocarnia recurvata, the bottle palm, and you can see that it has some character. It has what's called a caudex at the base. This is from Mexico, by the way, and then it grows quite slowly to 15 feet tall. The caudex itself can get the size of a Volkswagen Beetle. You guys remember the size of those cars, so it can get quite large. Typically, these are dioecious as well, so it's either male or female. But when they make either the male or female flowers, when they do that, they fork usually, and the stem will branch off. That can take years for that to happen. Now, the reason I'm showing this to you cradled in my arms is because these guys are one of those plants that I always say there's a few things that every horticulture student should own. And this is one of them. And the reason for that is it's pretty bulletproof. You could put it in a pot. And I have one outside my office here that's in a pot that's about a 36-inch wide pot, and it's 15 feet tall. And in the 60s and in the early 70s, my dad had it in a pot in his office at Ford Aerospace for like 10 years. And then he said, "Hey, you want this thing?" And he gave it to me when I was like moving out of the house. I said, "Yeah, I'll take it." And I've had it in a pot ever since then. So, I mean, the thing is just, I took it inside when I first moved out of the house. It was like in the center of the apartment. It was fine. Can handle low light, can handle full sun, can handle all of the harsh treatment that you might subject it to. So it's one of those things that follows you through your life, and like a parrot, right? So anyway, that's a Bocarnia recurvata, called the ponytail palm sometimes because the curve here kind of goes around like this and sometimes curls back up. Goes around and then it curls back up like a girl's ponytail would. I wouldn't know what that's like, but you get the idea, you get the picture, right? So, but the bottle palm works just fine. Some people call it an elephant's foot plant because of this caudex looking like an elephant's foot. And it does have kind of that crackly texture like an elephant's skin does. So anyway, there's that. Everybody should own one of those things. We've got thousands of them in little tiny flats at the horticulture department. All you have to do is, when we're back into the real world again, just say, "Can I have one of those?" And we'll give you one as long as you promise to keep it alive for the rest of your life. Okay.
Hey, Rick.
Yes.
If you keep it in a pot, do they grow pretty slowly, or?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Yeah, 'cause I have mine in a pot, and it's growing, but pretty slowly.
Yeah, slow. So that's why they do so well in that situation. Okay. Next one. Okay. Okay, so Dracaena Draco is another, it's a monocot, so it's, it's another very strange tree. And showing a leaf of it doesn't do too much, but the reason we're showing you the leaf, here it is, of Dracaena Draco, is to show you this end of the leaf where it attaches to the stem, okay? And you guys should probably see that it's kind of a reddish, orange to reddish color. And this is one that we're seeing planted more and more and more these days because they're drought tolerant. It's from Madagascar. And this is another one that has a big old stout trunk, and anytime it flowers, it branches and makes 2 stems. Anytime that stem flowers, it branches and makes 2 more. They say it does it about every 8 years, and you can actually follow one of these up and see every time it's flowered and branched. They can get quite old, at least 100 years. But this thing right here, this reddish color here that you can probably see is a resin, and it's to kind of fend off things that might pull or eat the leaves. But it's been used in many different applications. Probably the most interesting application that the resin has been used is to add to varnishes to color them. And so probably one of the most famous violins that has ever been built. And there was a whole movie about the red violin, and basically they took this sappy stuff that's in the axils of these leaves, mixed it in with the varnish, and they just used a lot of it, so it got really, really red, and that colored the varnish. So it's a unique tree. It's a great specimen tree for a succulent garden. You know, we're seeing them used in commercial settings more and more and more now. They're not really that good until they get up over your head. They kind of just look like a stick with a bunch of leaves on them. But once they get over your head and start branching, then the character really starts to come on. So we'll show you pictures of Dracaena Draco. Okay. These are the fruits of Dracaena Draco. Just you know, we've propagated a ton by taking these fruits, and they're easy to sow the seeds inside. So these are just so you guys can see that. Okay. Cycas revoluta from Japan is the sago palm. Extremely slow growing plant. And you can see here, here it is. There's one frond. These are the earliest of the conifers, these cycads. And they're either male or female, and they make either a male cone or a female cone. They're extremely slow growing, which makes them very expensive. There used to be a lot of thievery out in landscapes. I remember having more than one landscape where I planted this in the landscape, and it was stolen by somebody that recognized their value, plucked right out of the yard. So I hope that's not still going on, but it was upsetting when it happened. Anyway, relatively low light requirements for this plant. Can handle full sun if it's acclimated, but it can also handle partial shade, almost a full shade. Some years, if it's not happy, it puts out a new round of fronds every year. And some years, if it's not happy, it just says, nah, not this year. And then it'll hold off. And sometimes it'll hold off for 2 or 3 years if you're torturing your plant. And then when things are good, it'll put out its round of fronds. So one round of fronds means it's probably going to put out 40 fronds, and then the older leaves start to kind of fade away a little bit as time goes by. So this is a fresh new frond. These guys are prone to a woolly aphid and a scale that gets on the bottom side, and what you'll see the bug, and if you flip it over, you'll see little orange dots where that bug is chewing on the underside of the frond. Okay, so these are grown in pots. They're used as kind of accent plants in small gardens, in Asian themed gardens, close to ponds and that kind of thing. They have a real nice look to them, a very clean looking plant. Okay. Okay, so the very last one on our list, Castanospermum austral, is the Moreton Bay chestnut. It's a tropical tree with very lush leaves on it. We've had some that we've grown from seed in the department. They don't like being in a container too long. And so we've lost a few trying to keep them as specimens, but they really want to be planted out in the real world. But what I do have is part of one of their pods. And these pods, the reason they're called the Moreton Bay chestnut is that the seeds inside look like chestnut seeds. And so they're big and shiny and blackish. And so a pod can hold 1, 2, 3, up to 5 seeds, which would make the pod, if it had 5 seeds, it would make it pretty long. This one just has 2. This is from the Huntington. So it's one of those that I brought back for you guys to look at later, but there it is. This is right on the corner in the Huntington Library, on the corner of the original house that Henry Huntington lived in. So it's a big tree right in the corner of their house. And if you look up in there, you can see these pods. Excuse me, I think they are pods up in the tree. And then if you look carefully, you'll probably be able to see some down on the ground too, and look at them. Just don't stick them in your pocket and let anybody catch you doing that. Okay, so all right, so that's basically it on the specimens that I can show you. All right. Okay, let's go back. So if you guys need a break, you guys just speak up. There's a few on this list, but we'll be able to get through pretty quickly. And anything that I left out by showing you specimens, I'll make sure that I point out as we go through the pictures. So starting at the beginning again, Quercus robur. This is the English oak or the robin oak. This is from Europe. It's found in different parts of Europe, mostly in the British Isles. This tree can get up to 60 feet tall. The best characteristic of looking at this tree from far away is it's a very stout tree. So usually what you see is a very thick trunk and then a canopy coming out from this very, very thick trunk. But also this tree has classic looks to it. When you think of an oak tree, you often think of a leaf that has this lobed look, with these rounded lobes that are sticking out. In fact, if you were to see most companies that have like oak something in their name, they use this oak leaf as a part of their logo. It's often used because it's the most recognizable of the oak leaves. Okay. Now the acorn is pretty fat on this guy. It's not thin like Quercus agrifolia. These trees like to have summer water. And so that's one of their biggest challenges is our heavy clay soil and our lack of water for so many months. Here's the acorn. And so you can see it's pretty stout, fat, I guess I should say, with a big cap on it. Here's the bark of the English oak. And this is a classic classic look to these oak trees. Now, these trees live a long time, and many oaks do, by the way. In fact, when we talk about arboriculture, one of the divisions within arboriculture is called conservation arboriculture. And conservation arboriculture is centered around saving old specimen champion trees. Now, the reason I bring all of this up is that it's said of oak trees that they spend 300 years getting to maturity, 300 years in their mature glory, and then 300 years dying gracefully, which means that, you know, one of these trees could easily live up to 900 years in the perfect situation. And a lot of things that happen on these trees as they age, they do something called retrenchment, which means they slough off part of their canopy and just kind of grow a smaller canopy. For instance, if I were to look at this tree right here, this is in its full glory. But if I were to say, well, how big is this tree going to be when it starts to scale down? This would be the size of the canopy in its next retrenchment. So you can almost anticipate how that's going to be. So when these trees get really old, they're just these big old gnarly trunks with just very little up on top. That's when they're starting to get into 600, 700, 800 years old. So here's the leaf, that very recognizable lobed leaf, along with the acorns. It's native to Europe, fairly fast growing, 50 to 60 feet tall and 30 feet wide, short, stout trunk, and a wide open canopy. These are dark green and have 3 to 5 deep lobes and are the classic recognizable oak leaf image. They hold until late fall without much color change. Oaks are usually the last to drop their leaves in a fall scenario. And usually oak trees, a lot of them aren't all that super pretty. They kind of get kind of a ruddy, reddish brown color. Some do, some look pretty, but you know, these don't have much color. Acorns are varying in shape, coming into an abrupt point and covered by a third of a velvety cap. So the cap is supposed to cover about a third of the acorn. Okay, Phytolacca dioica. This is the ombu tree from Argentina and other parts of South America. You can see the base that it's developing, and you can see the multiple trunks that it's sending out. And sometimes as these get a little bit older and maybe a little too big, they'll snap off, and another new one will come up from this this base, this I guess you would call it a caudex. So this one hasn't really started to form its caudex, but it's becoming a pretty good sized tree. This is the one at the Huntington that's over 100 years old. So you can see, I think I have a picture of it with the students to give you some scale. Yeah, you can kind of see it here. So, so you can see that it's got these big old overarching branches. This is a female that we got the ones that are in the hort department from. So real interesting tree. I mean, I don't know what a classic application would be for this tree other than, you know, trying to come up with a relatively drought tolerant tree that could be a kind of a specimen or a focal point in one planter with one of these in the middle would probably make quite a statement. But it's hard to think of what a typical application would be for this tree. Here's the leaf, top and bottom. Remember the taco that we talked about. Here are the male flowers. We showed you the female flowers, and here is one of the branches. And you know, a saw will go right through those branches. They look formidable, but they're really quite soft. Here are the female fruits. Again, looking like little pumpkins. You might come up with something else, but for instance, this one to me looks like one of those little pumpkins, and they get kind of soft. And this is from one of the trees out that we propagated from the big one that you saw. Here they are. So this was a few years back. These are twice this size now. So this is the female here, and this is the male. You can see how they're kind of scraggly. They're starting to get a little bit of a base. Now they're twice this size. So they're much bigger now, and they do have a definitely prominent base. But you can see here's the female and the male next to each other. Pampas grassland, South America, 40 to 60 feet tall and 40 to 50 feet wide. Trunk consists of amylalogous secondary thickening rather than true wood. Taco-shaped leaves, light green and 4 to 6 inches long. Forms bulbous base that can get quite large. Male and female trees, which means dioecious. Fruit on female trees looks like a strand of tiny yellow pumpkins. Historical importance to the gaucho, said to often sleep under the ombu, using it for camp shelter and for markers. Well, that's a bad picture. This is Cedrus atlantica glauca. Here you can see those blue-gray needles, and you can also see the trunk. They form the typical or the true cedar cone that sits upright on top of the branches, facing upright. They look like the fly, you know, the thing that they got inside of and changed into a fly. Jeff Goldblum got in there. So there it is the upright cones. Start out kind of maroon color, and then they get a little lighter as time goes by. Here are the needles again. Remember, this is a true cedar, which means that all the needles radiate out from one little point. Here's the upswept branch tips that I was talking about. It says opposed to the nodding tips of Cedrus deodara. Here it is again. This is showing the difference in the needle size. For some reason, that picture looks kind of blurry, and I took it with my phone just a few days ago. So maybe I made it small or something. It looks a little blurry. But anyway, at least you can get the reference difference for size on Cedrus deodara and Cedrus atlantica. Here's Cedrus deodara and Cedrus atlantica glauca, side by side to give you a reference. These are obviously a little bit softer and longer. These are more stiff and short. And I mentioned something about how this tree has lots of different varieties. This is one that has a really twisty growth habit and can be trained into some kind of a, kind of an ornament in the yard almost. You have to work with it if you want it to become extreme. Like you can see that these branches are being tied. I mean, if you have the time. Okay, native to North Africa, slow growing to 60 feet tall and 30 feet wide. Shorter bluish needles are 1 inch long and in tufts like true cedars. Branches, although pointing downward, are swept slightly upward at the tips as opposed to the nodding tips of the deodar cedar. And then, of course, there are several varieties of this. Okay, feather palm, fan palm. And this is our little introduction into the palm world. So feather and fan. Here's a feather palm, here's a fan palm. So we can see the differences here. So those are two of the 4 different things we talk about: clumping versus single trunked. So this is a king palm, obviously, and then this is a Mediterranean fan palm, which is a clumper, and And this has multiple trunks and little ones coming out all the time. Sometimes clumping palms, you know, there is a little maintenance involved. You can actually create some really neat architectural features with clumping palms by deciding, hey, I want this one to become a trunk, and I'm going to cut these other ones back. So you can involve yourself and actually control the ultimate shape and how many trunks a clumping palm can have. If you do nothing, if you don't engage yourself into a clumping palm, they just look like a big kind of a thicket. Like, you know, there's not really any distinct trunks to them. There's just a lot of them all around each other. Okay, so let's start with Archantophoenix cunninghamiana. A long name, a mouthful for sure. This is the king palm. Now, this is a single feather palm, okay? And we're going to today we're just going to talk about just all right, how do we identify this thing? And this has all of those attributes to it. It has a very slender trunk, okay? By the way, this is from Eastern Australia. It has a slender trunk. The fronds, which are flat and pretty stiff, okay? So, you know, you don't see there's a name for the pleats that come out from the edges of the frond. On some, they kind of droop and get really floppy. These are stiff. They come straight out from the central vein or center part of the frond. Excuse me, I can't think of the name now. But the other thing that's unique to this palm is when it does join the trunk, it has a special flap that kind of wraps around the trunk and goes down a good 2-3 feet before it actually stops. So the top part is green. So you look at the king palm and you see gray trunk, and then you see this green trunk, which is actually the pieces of this frond that clasp around the trunk. Okay, and so this is unique. So the top part is green, the bottom part is gray, and the fronds themselves actually wrap around the trunk for a good 2 feet down the trunk. Also, what you're seeing are the blossoms, which form right where the green part and the gray part meet. And it sends out this little white antler-like appendage that has the flowers on it. And you can see on this one, you can see the new flower here, and then last year's flower here. So they persist, and those flowers drop off as little flowers. Some people don't like that. I had clients say, would you please take these off my palm trees? And so, you know, I would do that. But I think that this is one of the kind of coolest characteristics of those palms. So people are strange, but you know, when you're in a service business, you just kind of nod and try to say, hey, I kind of like those. And if they look at you like you're nuts, you take them off for them. Okay, so now this is something you'll see a lot. The fact that it has a thin trunk means that when it's standing by itself, some people say, you know, this is just not dynamic enough for me. And so in the world of king palms, they force multiple stems in one hole. And create a multi-trunk, and it's not natural, okay? And this is also kind of dangerous because as these trunks widen, they press against each other, and this is not good form, but people do it all the time, and the nurseries do it. So just make sure you're aware that even though this is a single palm, oftentimes you'll see them clumped together because somebody has decided that they like that look better. So here you have the gray trunk, and you see when they're shorter, sometimes the gray trunk is way down here, and it looks like it's mostly green trunk, but it's always the same length, and then you always have the flowers coming out from the base of where the green meets the gray. When you order palm trees from a grower, they ask how many feet of gray trunk you want. And that determines, you know, the age and, you know, what you're actually looking for. So you have to be distinctive. One of the things that I'm seeing on this picture is a queen palm in the background. And what I would want you to notice is, you remember I said that these fronds are stiff. In other words, the individual pleats that come off the central spine of the frond don't get floppy, don't drape down, but the queen palm is the exact opposite. It does get very floppy, and it looks like an ostrich feather. So you can see two side by side here, okay? And we're going to give you another opportunity to see them side by side, but I just want you to start thinking about being able to tell these apart. So here you can see the gray trunk and the green trunk meeting. When they're younger, it's less defined, but if this flower were to come out, it would come out right here from this point. And then you can see the rings from fronds as they disconnect from the trunk. So the fronds actually wrap all the way around the trunk, and when they come off with that and leave that ring behind. This is looking up at the Huntington. There's a whole grove of them just down below the downhill side of the main mansion of Huntington. So there's a whole bunch of them together. But you can look up there and see that they're quite old. One thing that I would tell you about this while I'm thinking about it is, I did a lot of planting of palm trees in my landscape contracting days, and you know, sometimes there are companies that will actually go out and move palm trees for you, and maybe it's getting too tall, maybe there's wires, like electric wires. The palm tree is going to just keep going up and getting into those wires, and so they call up a company and say, hey, can you come take this tree? And they say, yeah, we'll come take it as long as we keep the tree, you know, because that's their payment. And that would be fine. King palms do not like to be moved. So, you know, nobody will move one of these for you. And if you do have to dig them out and move them, it's probably going to be the demise of the palm tree. You can't say that about queen palms and a lot of the others, but these are sensitive to being moved when they're mature. Okay, so here we go. Here's that distinctive characteristic that we always look for on the king palm. Here we can see where they put more than one in a hole here. And then, oh, look, there's Rhapis excelsa right here. Oh, and look, Phoenix robellini right here. So a lot of times you can, you know, people are into palms, you can see. And oh, look, this is Phoenix reclinata right here, but we'll talk about that a little bit later. Okay, single feather palm. Slow growing, native to the rainforests of Eastern Australia, to 50 feet tall or more and 10 to 15 feet wide. Stiff, flat fronds attached to the trunk, narrow, slender, smooth trunk with a distinctive clasping green petiole. Chandelier-like flower bloom forms at the base of the fronds. Once a year, you usually get a new one. Okay, moving from king to queen. Cyagrus romans-offiana. This is the queen palm from Brazil. I said the king palm was tender and not that rugged. Exact opposite here. These guys can handle pretty much anything you throw at them. So look at the fronds and look at how the pleats just drape down. Real elegant looking. This palm has had so many names. When I learned it, it was Aracastrum romans-offianum, and then it was Cocos plumosa. That was its name, referring to the fronds and their plume-like. And then it came back to Cyagrus romans-offianum. So it's had a few names since I've been around. Here you've got a big old fat trunk, and you know, a little area where the fronds are produced. stout trunk, not nearly as elegant and thin. But these palms, I think, are elegant in their own way because they have that kind of plumy looking top to them. And these are one of the best trees to create scale next to a large building, next to another large building. So if you have a 2-story house next to another 2-story house, and you don't have the room to put a big tall tree in there, this will actually get big enough to kind of create scale and not have to be super wide. So those are things to think about. I think I even have an example of that to show you. Queen palms, I used to order them from this guy out in the desert. He grew them in the ground, and I'd call him up and he'd say, I'd say, I need some. He goes, how much brown trunk do you want? How much gray trunk do you want? How tall do you want them? I'd say, I want 25 feet and I need to have, a good 8 feet of gray trunk. Oh, those are going to cost you. And then he would dig them out that day, throw them on his trailer, pulling his trailer with a little Toyota truck. And then he'd pull up to the job site and they would be bare rooted. He had just dug them out that day out of some sandy soil. And then he'd just kick them off his truck and I'd write him a check. So he was the palm tree guy. I bet he's still doing it, but these guys can handle that. They can handle being moved and planted and the same day. They always survive. So, okay. So now we've reached the point where you have to chime in. We talked about scale, okay? And big houses next to big houses. But tell me what palm trees we have in front of this particular house. What do we have there? Who wants to chime in?
Yeah, what? 3 kings and 3 queens?
Exactly. Very good. And it looks like the kings are kind of planted in an atypical way, right? They're kind of put into the same hole where they've had to grow away from each other for the first few years and then grow up from there. But it's good to see these two next to each other to give you a sense. Much wider fronds on the queen palms, much stouter trunks. And then again, you've got the 2-story thing, and you can get the palm close to the house without, having branches going in there and creating a problem. I don't know what happened here, but I stopped and took a picture. Somebody decided that he needed to have, a whole bunch of stuff in one hole. But you can see queens and kings in this particular situation. So here's a king palm. Here's a king palm here. Another one here. Another one back here. Here's a queen palm. Here's a queen palm. And I just did this so you guys could stare at them and try to figure out what they are. So queen, king, king, king. Here's another king palm. And then in the back, there's a queen palm. Okay. Single feather palm. Brazilian native, 50 feet tall, 20 to 25 feet wide. The fronds go way out. One frond can go 10 feet in one direction, 10 feet in the other direction. Fastest growing and most rugged of the commonly used palms. Arching, glossy, bright green, plume-like fronds give this palm an elegant look. Okay, Brahia armata. This is the Guadalupe, this is the Mexican blue palm. We've gone from fast growing to really slow growing. This is one of the slowest growing palms. It's usually found in areas that are pretty arid. I see these mixed in with California friendly landscapes. I see them mixed in with succulent landscapes sometimes. Because look, you can see the senecio down below here, and you can see the contrast with this gray blue. Now it's called Brahia armata because along these fronds here are little hook-like prickles. and it's like almost like a saw. And so that's why it's called Brahia armata. Here it is. Now, this is when it gets a little bit bigger and it's planted in a lawn. You know, it can handle this okay, but you know, it's used to being in places where it doesn't get watered for months on end. What I wanted to say about Brahia armata, and I don't know if I've installed the pictures that I took a month or so ago. I probably haven't, but they have a very distinguishing flower plume that they send way out. So let me see if I can find that for us. There it is. Okay, so this is the distinctive characteristic above and beyond the fact that the fronds are a blue-gray color, is that it sends its flowers way out there. And so you can see the new flowers way beyond the outside of the fronds. And then you can see last year's hanging on here. So these are some old ones. They've been around a long time. This is a younger one. You can start to see some of the little hook-like spines along here. Do you guys see those along the edge here? Now you can see the flowers that I was talking about. So there's a senior citizen center on West 19th Street in Costa Mesa that has these planted around the perimeter, and they go off every year with these big plumes. This is a picture that I took in Claremont across the road. This is College Avenue or College Drive here, but you can see these distinctive blossoms. So you'll usually be able to see them because they persist even after the flowers have faded. These stalks will persist out there. Okay, it's a single fan palm from Mexico, grows slowly, 20 to 40 feet tall, spreading 12 to 25 feet wide. Armata species refers to the hook-like spines along the frond petiole, silvery blue, almost white leaves, conspicuous long sprays of white flowers, can handle heat and wind. Okay. Brahia edulis. This is the Guadalupe palm. Okay. No more, whitish blue fronds. These are very, very much like Washingtonias, but it's a smaller palm for sure. But the fronds, they look a lot like Washingtonias to me. So here's one in the hort department, but one of the, I'm always trying to find the distinctive thing, so obviously on Brahia armata, it's bluish colored fronds and those big sprays of blossoms. These blossoms you don't really see sticking out, so they're pretty much tucked inside. But when I learned this tree, the teacher said the trunk looks like an elephant's leg. And or an elephant's trunk, I think he might have said, but I said, well, that's a pretty big trunk. So you guys get what I'm talking about, that really rough, platey looking, concentric rings that you might see on a trunk or a elephant's leg. So that always helped me find it when I'm looking for palms, like at the Huntington. That was how I always found it when I had the class in tow. So it worked for me. So here's one in Claremont. And you can see this is a pretty an older one. These don't get nearly as big as Washingtonias. They're a stouter trunk. Really nice tree. They're from the Guadalupe Islands off the coast of Baja. Let's see. Here's a whole row of them. And you can kind of see the stature. Instead of getting really tall and skinny like Washingtonia robusta, They're kind of a medium-sized tree. Their fronds don't get as wide as Washingtonia furlifera. They're just kind of a good overall sized tree. I think we'll probably be seeing more and more of these as time goes by. So this is a single fan palm from Guadalupe Island off the coast of Baja, slow growing to 30 feet. So Washingtonia robusta, 100 feet. This is 30 feet. 30 feet tall, 15 feet wide. Leaves disconnect cleanly. So instead of having that basket-like where you cut the fronds off and it looks like a basket, these disconnect and leave that trunk that we talked about. Stout elephant hide-like trunk. Takes both desert and coastal conditions, seeing as though Guadalupe Island gets a little less rainfall than we do, but it's right, obviously, near the coast. Okay, moving down the line. Now, make sure you don't become overwhelmed as we go through all of these palms. You know, you start looking at palms and you're like, whoa, wait a minute. Just remember, you want to make sure that you write the most distinctive characteristics down. They won't fail you. So this is Butea capitata or capitata. This is from South America, called the Pindo palm. I've heard it called the jelly palm as well, because the fruits that it makes are quite edible and tasty. And they do make jelly out of it, or a jelly-like stuff they put on food. Now, as we're looking at this first picture, we can start to see the characteristics that I'm going to point out to you. First of all, this has kind of a gray-green frond, but we've already seen some of that. This is a single feather palm. But what I want you guys to notice is how the frond curls around and almost starts to point back towards the trunk. You guys see that? Now, it's not doing it so much here, but you'll see it a little bit more. So the central spine of the frond is curvy, and it curves all the way around and starts to point either down or back towards the trunk. The pleats of the frond itself come away from that spine like the letter V. You guys see that? So you see that curvy spine, and then look at the pleats of the frond, how they're upright, kind of like the letter V. And that kind of accentuates that shape. So look for that. The next thing I would want you to look for is how the fronds line up when they're pruned off. You see how the little stubs line up very nicely in a row? This they persist on there, and so one of the things that you do if you're a maintenance guy is you recognize that and you cut them all at the same length, and it looks pretty cool. This might show that characteristic a little bit here, this picture. See how these guys are all lined up? And it looks very geometric, the way the fronds come away from the trunk, all lined up. And then look at that curvature I was talking about on the spine. Okay, look for that. This is a characteristic of this palm tree that you should be able to recognize when you walk up to it. Here's one, an older one, and you're starting to see some of the old stalks kind of sloughing off. Here's a young one to the right. But that curvy frond, and in fact, where I've got the red arrow pointing to the left, it should be pointing to that characteristic the most. Okay. Now, other palms kind of have a bit of a weep to them, but nothing where it actually curves right around, where you're seeing the spine, this outline clearly like this. And it's the reason you're seeing this outline clearly is because the pleats are facing in the opposite direction in the letter V. So you get to see that shape. Does that make sense? So I know I'm kind of pounding this point, but this is what saves the day for us, I think, if we can look for these characteristics. Okay, another single feather palm, South American native, 10 to 20 feet tall, small, with a 10 to 15 foot width on it. Green of blue-green leaves curved around towards the trunk and have a V-shaped orientation of the frond to the central petiole. Spikes of yellow flowers produce an edible fruit said to taste like apricot, banana, pineapple blend. So we stopped one year. By the way, at OCC, they have these in front of the library. We planted 6 of them. One died, so now there's 5. But there's one that is always producing fruit. And so we usually stop and try it, taste it. I don't know about the apricot banana pineapple blend. I've never had anybody jump in and say, yeah, that's exactly it. But there it is. Okay. Caryota urens from Southeast Asia is the fishtail wine palm. Now, this has a characteristic similar to the king palm in that it has these fronds that kind of clasp the stem. But unlike the king palm, it has a very different looking frond. And the frond here has a real jaggedy edge. It looks like the fin of a fish. Okay. And that's the characteristic that you'll always go for. It looks like a fin of a fish, you know, very kind of jaggedy edged. Now, this kind of blurry picture in the left-hand side is one that these palms, this genus, is monocarpic. Okay, so what that means is it flowers once and then it dies. And so they can get upwards of, I think it's 60 feet plus tall, quite tall. I got a phone call from a gal that lived in Bellevue. And she had lived in kind of this old mansion, and in the back there was an apartment building. She had a beautiful backyard, like a botanical garden. And in the back somebody had put in a big old apartment building, and these things were lined up along the back and kind of gave her full screening from that apartment building. And she called. She said, "God, they're just not looking very good." And I got out my camera and I was kind of zooming in a little bit, and I saw that they were starting to flower. And so I had to tell her that they're all going to die. Oh God, that was painful, because you know there was nothing coming up to replace those. She's, "Can you cut the flowers off and stop it?" And I said, "No, we can't." But anyway. That's kind of one of those things to think about. It'll live a full generation. Maybe, well, I think I have it written down as to how long they typically live. Here's the flower and resulting fruit. Now, if we were to look up on the top, the fronds would be almost dead up at the top. The energy they put into flowering and fruiting, pretty much, you know, that's the end of the palm. So this is a single feather palm, Southeast Asia native, fast to 40 feet to 80 feet tall, 15 feet wide. Leaves are finely divided into leaflets that look like the fins of a fish. You can see those leaflets, by the way, even if the palm is 60 feet tall. You can pick out those fish fins. So it's not going to be, you know, you don't have to have them in your hand. Trunk is handsome and slender with a slight hairiness to the trunk when it's younger. Monocarpet dies after blooming. Let's go back here. Whoops. I'm just going to see if I could find any of the you know, I have a poor cross section of pictures for you guys on this. Okay. All right. Let's move down the line here. Chamaerops humilis. This is a Mediterranean native around the Mediterranean regions, South Europe, North Africa. This is a clumping fan palm. The petials are thin and they have little spines on them. They're difficult to prune. This is a picture at the Huntington from years ago in a planter, and this is kind of a good application for these. They can be quite architectural when you select the proper fronds to, or excuse me, proper trunks to keep. This is one I took in a picture I took in Claremont. This one's getting a little unruly, and you know, usually you have a lot of new stuff coming in, and you can either thin that out. But there comes a point where you usually have to decide, hey, is this trunk going to stay or go, or what should I do here? You have to have there's input for sure. It produces a flower that will start out kind of a yellowish color. Then that turns into fruit, and then that fruit is kind of a yellow to orange color fruit, and that fruit stays on. And if it doesn't fall off, it kind of turns black. So oftentimes you see all of that. So here you can see the new fruit, the flower right here where my arrow is, and then the fruit starts out being green and then gets orange, and then this is the fruit from maybe last year or the year before. So you can see this black stuff. This is either a year or 2 years old, and you see the little spines on the petiole here. Okay. This is the one in front of the horticulture department. We have a few. Here you can see the fruit and how it changes color and then kind of hangs on there. So I've done a lot of palm tree cleaning in my day. Some people just get really upset with these old fruit stalks. They want them off. So then you got to get your gloves on because you're dealing with all of these spines. So something to think about, that, you know, sometimes this persistent fruit can be a problem. This one's been removed. We have another one at the other end there, but you can see the new fronds, the older fronds, and the fronds that are dead here at the bottom. You can see the multi trunks that we have. Okay, this is a clumping fan palm. So the Mediterranean means that it just loves to live in our environment, can handle long, hot, dry summers, no problem. Europe's only native palm. Trunks can grow to 20 feet and tall and wide with multiple trunks. Green to bluish green fans on a spiny leaf stalk. Tolerates poor soils and strong winds. Good in large containers or raised planters. I've had one in a pot for so long in my backyard. Anyway, it can stay in containers for a long time. Excellent specimen or impenetrable hedge. So if you were to not prune the individual trunks and just leave it, nobody's getting in your yard. Okay, now we're getting into the 3 Phoenix. So I tell you what we'll do. We'll go through the 3 Phoenix, and I'll check in with you and see how you feel if you want to take a little break. The Phoenix have the largest and the smallest. So this is Phoenix canariensis, the Canary Island palm. This is the one at the Huntington, which has been there for ages. But this tree is, these trees can get very large. Each one of these fronds can get 10 to 12 feet long. These are growing real close to where I live, and they're from when they first planted this area up. So it goes along 19th Street and along Tustin Avenue. And you can just see these trees are probably close to 100 years old. But they're a big scale tree for sure. They don't fit into a residential spot. And let me just say that if ever you have to deal with one of these when it's first growing, you're not going to be happy around this palm tree until the trunk is tall enough so that all the fronds are not hitting you in the head. And that means it's got to be pretty old. So from the time you plant this tree to the time the fronds are all overhead, we're talking about at least 15 years, 20 years. And in the meantime, this is just a big floppy, obnoxious clump. So getting it up above your head is I know I've had to mow around a few of these when they're young. So remember, it's a phoenix, so they have those really sharp spines at the base. They have a unique pattern. You can actually see the width of the frond kind of makes this diamond pattern when it disconnects. These are our 3 Canary Island palms. Now, these 3 were planted in the horticulture department in, I think it was the early 60s by a guy named Fred Olkers, who still volunteers for us now that he's in his 80s. But he planted these from little 5-gallon cans. And there's 1 male and 2 females. And so you can see the females have these fruits. They're date-like fruits that come, and they drop, and so they're seeding themselves in our lawn. And so Joe's always saying we need to take this male out of here so we don't have these fruits all the time. And I always think it's good to leave them so you can see the 2, but anyway, it creates a bit of a problem. Also, when we have to pay a company to come and take these dead fronds out, because when the Santa Ana winds come, if there happens to be class in session, these will come down, and then they still have those spines on them, and you don't want one of these coming down on your head. So we actually pay a company once a year to come and take those dead ones out of there. Here you can see the females, and so these are they have shed most of their fruit already. Now these trees are prone to a disease called fusarium, and it's spread by chainsaws. There's something about the mechanism of the chainsaw with that kind of pithy debris that gets inside, and it can be passed along from one to the other. If you move the chainsaw from one tree to the next, you can actually pass the disease along. So if ever you see somebody up in one of these trees with a chainsaw, you want to scold them, tell them that you know better, put your hands on your hips and scold them, because they potentially could be passing disease along. There are some situations where in permanent groves of these, like in Newport Center, and the entrance into Fashion Island, Newport Center, they have a separate saw for each tree up in the tree. So they keep the saws separate so they don't pass fusarium. So these can get quite large. Single feather palm, the biggest of the palms. Canary Islands, big heavy trunk palm that grows slowly to 60 feet tall and up to 50 feet wide. So big old canopy on that thing. Not for small landscapes, but dramatic when used properly for scale. Fronds have nasty spines along the petials, like all in the Phoenix genus. Females make cluster of bright orange date-like fruits that can seed in lawns. Oh, from the largest to the smallest, Phoenix robellini. This is from Laos. This is the pygmy date palm. And this is a single trunk palm tree, but look at how it is in this pot. Somebody said, no, it looks too sparse. I'm going to stick a couple more in there. When I used to order from the palm tree guy, I'd say, I want some Phoenix robellini. He said, do you want singles, doubles, or triples? And I would say, just singles, please. So anyway, he would bring them that way, however I wanted them. So here are our trees in the horticulture department. You can see the trunk and the texture of this single trunk. and you can probably see that they get a little bit, they look a little gangly when they're kind of growing by themselves. We keep them, you know, they're spaced out so that you can see how they look individually, but you can also kind of get a sense why people say, oh, this needs to have another one in with it. So people do this all the time. The classic mistake people make is they love these trees and say, well, let's put one on either side of our front sidewalk, right at the entrance. There's one on either side. They plant them when they're kind of cute and small. And then they spend the next 8 years slapping you in the face as you walk up your front walkway. And, you know, getting these up over your head is not very easy, because this tree is 10 feet tall, but, you know, from here down, this is all face slappy stuff. So you people just have to think about those things. Designers have to think about stuff like that. Here they are, again, growing by themselves as single feather palms. Oh, and this is a picture you always have to take. I have, you know, us bald guys have to deal with a lot of stuff. But I have been in pruning these things and got jabbed in the head. And it's a memory that will stay with you. So not pleasant. It'll go right through your hat and through your hair. So it's not just us bald guys. Just be careful when you're around these phoenix. Oh, and when I was in Washington, D.C., in 2017, I was like, oh, I have to take a picture of this. So there's, here they are in pots up in the Capitol. Of course, they put several in one pot. Okay, single feather palm from Laos, the smallest of the date palms, grows 6 to 10 feet tall and 6 to 8 feet wide. Often planted in forced groupings of 3 because of the gangly look of mature single trunk. Bright green, fine textured, curving leaves, great in a pot or in small groves, likes bright, indirect light. And these they can handle partially shady conditions. So the other two date palms need full sun. This one can handle an understory condition. Okay. And this is the last of the phoenixes, and then we'll check in with you guys. This is Phoenix reclinata. Now, reclinata comes from, this is a clumping feather palm. Reclinata, the species, it refers to the fact that these trunks are often curved or reclining, like you're sitting in a recliner, okay? Now, you don't really see it so much here. There is a slight curve to this trunk, slight curve to this trunk, slight curve to this trunk, because as they're growing, they're kind of growing away from each other and then sweeping upwards. And this is a characteristic that we see. Here you can see it a little bit on this guy, and you can see it a little bit more on this picture here. But the curvature of the trunks as they kind of sweep away from each other is the characteristic of this particular palm, okay? So you'd have to see it probably in a full-grown situation to really be able to identify it. Although I'm only giving you 3 phoenix. One is huge, one is small, and this is the medium-sized one, okay? And this is the only clumper. So it makes date-like fruits, and it has those spines on the fronds, and here they are growing away from each other. This is in Claremont, grouping in Claremont. This is just outside of the horticulture department on a little island. You know, we have this little kind of a dish-like lawn outside the horticulture department. That's a 100-year floodplain that's supposed to trap water that collects when we have these really bad floods. But we planted this guy out there, and I just had to get a close-up of the spines for you. So they have a couple of these at the Huntington. One that has been pruned and is so old that it doesn't grow any new pups anymore. And then they have a couple that have never been touched. And so it's just a big hedge of palm fronds. You can't really even see it. So if you were to grow one of these for somebody, your job would be to expose those trunks, which means you'd be getting in there with your gloves and all. So I had clients I had to do this for, and so that's why I make such a big fuss about the spines. Okay, here they are again. Clumping feather palm, African native, the Senegal date palm. African native, grows 20 to 30 feet tall and 20 to 40 feet wide. It's a big clump. Species name refers to the upward sweeping, reclining nature of the trunks, not for small areas. Without being cleaned, removing offshoots, it can look like a big spiny hedge. Grade seaside plant. So if you've got a place that's big enough, this one would be great. Okay, so what do you think? We've got, we're halfway through the slides. You guys want to take 10 minutes? Okay.
Yes,
So
please.
okay, so it's 7:09. Let's come back at 7:20. How's that? Okay. All right, we'll see you in a bit. Okay, I think we should be back, ready to go. So the next one on our list, listed at 156, is Rhapis excelsa. Excuse me. This is the lady palm. You know, both the Rhapis excelsa and Rhapis humilis are from China. We refer to this, you know, as a fan palm, but instead of, it's a clumping fan palm, but it has canes. So we can kind of see and hear these various canes that are growing up. These canes are only about an inch and a half wide, and they have kind of black stringy hair on them. You know, and this Rhapis has been in this spot for decades. So it's, you know, slow growing, you know, if you have one of these and one of the canes is getting kind of high or bumping into something, you can go follow that cane all the way down to the bottom and cut it off, and nobody's any of the wiser. So that would be the only real pruning that you would do to a palm like this. Obviously that and taking off old fronds. So remember, this one has fewer fingers, okay? And it has blunt ends on it. Fewer fingers and blunt ends would be how we would recognize Rhapis excelsa. Also, we will see this 10 times more than we'll see the other one. Here it is in a tub, ready to go out. Constantly finding these in interior planting configurations because of their ruggedness, the fact that they don't really mind being root confined in pots, that they, you know, I've seen them planted in pure lava rock, and I've seen them grow and do fine in there for a long, long time. But see how those fingers are spread apart, and always kind of look for those blunt, flat tips. Here's a close-up of the trunk to show some of the hairiness to those canes. So it's a clumping fan palm, cane-like stalks, slow-growing Chinese native, 5 to 12 feet tall and as wide because it's a clumper. Cane-like stalks are covered with dark brown hairs, one of the finest of house plants, tolerating low light, moderate neglect, although it responds to raised light levels as well as fertilization and proper watering. So they push these along in the nursery trade by giving them all the goodness that they want. 5 to 9 blunt tipped, as if cutting with pinking shears, finger on each frond. Here's Rhapis humilis. So this is the rattan palm, and we have one of these in the department, kind of around the corner from the front of the department, and it's growing quite nicely where it is. It's protected from south-facing sun. It just gets the perfect amount of light where it is. And here's, obviously me holding the frond out. Instead of 5 to 9 fingers, we're talking about probably 20. And also this one comes to a sharp point. I'm kind of pointing to one of them here, so you can see what we're talking about. This guy right here. This is just a tall, what they look like when they get taller. God, we're just a little light on photos, but you get the idea, I think. Clumping fan palm, cane light stalks, China native, very, very slow growing to 18 feet tall as opposed to 15, 3 feet wide. Many more thinner fingers on each fan make for an elegant look and great lighting subject. Harder to find in the industry. Now you notice the width of the clumper, the fact that it doesn't clump and spread quite as much is probably part of why it's not used as often. It's just not as prolific. Okay, moving on to something you haven't seen yet. This is the windmill palm. This is Trachycarpus fortunei. This is a single fan palm, and it has a hairy trunk. And there are a couple different, I've heard a couple different stories as to why it's called the windmill palm. One story is that it has the pleats on the frond come almost all the way around, but that's not always the case. And so I don't think that's a good thing. But what I think is the reason it's called the windmill palm is if you look at the caliper of this spine compared to the fan itself, you see how it's very, very thin. And so what I have noticed in the wind is that these things kind of flap back and forth and respond to a light breeze by flapping back and forth. You know, they don't do this so much, but the fans kind of rock back and forth. And I think that's probably it more than anything else. Now, this is a single fan palm, and usually people plant them in groupings, not clumped into one hole, but, you know, a tall one in the back, a medium one, then maybe another medium or a shorter one towards the front. I've actually seen these in perfect settings where there might be a little alcove where they kind of tuck them in, where they can grow up inside of this alcove as a single fan palm. They can look a little gangly, you know, just with one stalk and one fan up on the top. But if you think about it thoughtfully, and you know, either plant them in groupings or in the right perfect spot to sit by themselves, they can be pretty cool looking. These are growing along Newport Boulevard as you get closer to the Balboa Peninsula on the central median. Now, another characteristic of this is it's from China, but it is the most cold tolerant of the palms. It can handle temperatures down to 10 degrees without batting an eye, which is a pretty significant thing because most palms are tropical and, you know, sensitive to frost and that kind of thing. But this one can handle it. And so we tend to see these more often in places that we wouldn't see other palm trees. They do have a little fruit on them, a flower stalk that provides these little fruits afterwards that drop off. They have a hairy trunk for sure. So it's a single fan palm from China, very hardy palm, grows fast to 30 feet tall and 10 feet wide. Trunk is generally thicker at the top than on the bottom. So as it ages, it gets a little bit more stout. And that's another thing that people think makes it look a little gangly, to have it be fatter on the top and more spindly on the bottom. Trunk covered with thick blackish hair, thin tooth stalks with 3-foot fans at the ends move in the breeze, yellow flower clusters followed by orange to brown fruits. So a hardy palm, single, moves in the breeze, and we see these out there in the landscape. There's another palm called the Livingstonia that has a look similar to this, but this is the smaller of those two. Okay, now into something that's pretty striking. This is Bismarckia nobilis. We don't have a common name down here for you, so don't be upset. You know, if you leave it blank, you'll get full credit. Or if you write NCN, I'll be even happier. But this one's from Madagascar, and this palm is gorgeous. It needs to have some room, however. It gets quite wide, and the biggest mistake I've seen people make is planting this and not giving it enough room to grow. Look at how the pleats of the fan palm wrap all the way around. Look at how it's just really almost a whitish silver color. They're big in scale, even at a young age. So you have to give them quite a bit of room to grow. They have these real cool looking flowers that are kind of a purplish color and twist around. And then in these little guys, you see these kind of twisty looking guys. They're little tiny white flowers like coral coming out. So it's, you know, it's little polyps of the coral plant coming out. It's very, very cool looking against the sky. Now here are those flower stalks. So there'll be little tiny yellow flowers dotting along these burgundy coral-like stalks. It's pretty neat flower. Also, these little cinnamon rusty dots are a characteristic of the Bismarckia. And they're kind of like cinnamon fuzzy little dots that you'll see on the frond petioles, all the way up the frond petioles. Okay, so it's a single fan palm from Madagascar. Spectacular palm, gets 30 to 40 feet tall and 25 feet wide. There's a house on Magnolia Street that's got him along his driveway. And it's in a little planter that's 5 feet wide. And I could just hear the frond scraping against his pickup truck every night when he drives in the driveway. Grayish-white leaves are unique and provide interest in the landscape. So in the in the college, there's a building called Special Services that we have these out in front, and they're in a sea of senecio. They look pretty cool. Cinnamon fuzzy dots along the petiole. Be sure to give it room to grow. Interesting tiny yellow flowers on maroon spikes like sea coral. We also, if you guys ever remember OCC, there's a building off the Merrimack parking lot called the ABC building that was built about 8 years ago. And it's got a big circular planter out in front. And we planted one of these in the middle of that circular planter. And it's just perfect scale. So when we go back, you'll have to look for it. Okay, Bocornia recurvata is the bottle palm. It's from Mexico, 12 to 15 feet tall. Again, this lives a long time and can handle restricted growth in pots, can handle low light conditions, can handle drought, can handle lots and lots of abuse. Usually branches once it flowers. People can keep them in pots for years and years. They grow a little faster, obviously, when they're put out in the ground. But they could be a great specimen in the landscape, great in a California-friendly or a succulent landscape. These caudexes are really cool looking. Here's one of the ones we have in the department. You know, we probably propagate a couple hundred of these a year into little tiny pots, and even when they come out as little seedlings, they have that little tiny swelling at the base of these little inch or two high seedlings. You have a little bulb at the base, so they hold their character from very young till very old. This one's actually getting chewed a little bit by squirrels. It's not a palm. From Mexico, this tree gets 12 to 15 feet tall, possible to 30 feet over time. One or more trunks arise from its greatly swollen base called a caudex. Sharp edge strap-like leaves can curve back towards the stem like a girl's ponytail. Can handle many different growing conditions as well as low light conditions. Can grow in a pot for years. One thing that I should say is that the only maintenance that's required for this thing is to pull off the old leaves. And, you know, they kind of get yellow and then they turn brown and they kind of hang on there. But it's so easy to pull those leaves off. So you do that maybe once or twice a year. And then the old flower stalks, usually you have to cut those off, but they don't flower every year. Some do, some don't flower until they get to be 10, 15 years old. So you don't usually have to worry about that. So they're pretty easy to keep around. Dracaena Draco, the dragon tree, another one from Madagascar. Very interesting focal point in a yard or a specimen in a yard. Here you can see the stems. I think it's about every 8 years that it flowers, and you can see where it flowers and where it splits off into two. You can also see, you know, where somebody has cut up the wood, and you can see the resin kind of almost looking like blood. Wouldn't somebody feel bad if they didn't know about this and then they came back and looked at it? And then of course there are the fronds that have the remnants of the resin where it attached to the trunk. Makes a really cool pattern on the trunk as well. And this kind of swelling is kind of otherworldly. And here you can see the trunk splitting and the pattern that's made on the trunk. This is the one at the Huntington Library in the Desert Garden. There's a little sign that if you go that you'll have to read about it. It was there from the very beginning of the Huntington, so 100 years. And there's a couple big galvanized poles that are kind of holding it. It had a big piece break out of it. And then there's a violin there just to kind of show that they use that to mix with resin, or the what do you call it, varnish that they put on violins. They use that resin to mix with varnish. It's a monocot with a tree-like form. Canary Island. Oh, I got it wrong. I said Madagascar. I'm sorry. It's from the Canary Islands in western Morocco. Grows to 30 feet tall and is wide. Old ones are much larger. Strap-like blue grayish leaves up to 18 inches long. 2 to 3 inches wide. Have a reddish resin-like sap where leaves join the stem. Fragrant flowers followed by reddish round fruits cause stem to branch after flowering. And look, I got the timing wrong as well, shooting from the hip there. Each stem grows for about 15 years before flowering again. So we were trying to, it's kind of left me when I was talking about it, but I'm remembering a little bit more now. I know that what we did was we tried to count the amounts of branches on that big one at the Huntington and see how many times 15 we could count. Resin has many historical medicinal uses over the years and was thought to be used as enhanced violin varnishes. Okay, Cycas revoluta. This is the sago palm. This is very, very slow growing and usually is some kind of it's usually a focal point in a landscape. You know, in a special spot where looking down on it can be attractive. Usually you buy them small because they're expensive to buy big. This is a female. Remember, this is a conifer, the early parts of the conifer. So this is a female cone, big round one at the top. And then this is a male cone. This is the one at the Huntington. It's in the Japanese garden, not too far from the arched bridge. So you know if you go, you'll want to see this. This is about as big as you'll ever see these things, and you can see how it clumps over time. But it can go for decades without having a pup, and oftentimes in the landscape, if you have one of these and it does make a little pup at the base or along the trunk, people come along and just snap it off and take it home. Here it is again. This is in George Washington, in his greenhouse. They bring him out in the summer, put him in his greenhouse. Here they are outside, single trunk. Okay, cone bearing from Japan. This very, very slow growing cycad gets 10 feet tall. It looks more like a palm. That's why we've got it thrown in the mix. Leaves are 2 to 3 feet long and finely divided into many narrow leathery segments. Great as a specimen or used in Asian-themed garden. Can pup from the base or along the trunk. When older, gets scale on the underside of the leaves. Expensive to buy due to its very slow growth rate. Okay. Phytostachys bambusoides, the giant timber bamboo. This is one that we would rarely see out in the landscape. There's another version of this that we'd probably see more often, but this is one that we have at the horticulture department, and we wanted to have a large clumping bamboo on our trees list. The reason we wanted to is we thought, when we're talking about all the different types of ornamentals out there, we often don't think about bamboos. And there are 2 types of bamboos. There's clumping bamboos and there's running bamboos. Clumping bamboos, the clump just gets bigger and bigger. Running bamboos send out runners that will send up offshoots off these runners way out into your yard. And so running bamboos are outlawed in California. All bamboos that you usually would buy would be clumping bamboos because of the fact that they can become a nuisance. Now, just they've also been outlawed at Orange Coast College. And the reason for that is that there's been a couple of landscape architects that have designed landscapes for some of the new buildings. And bamboo can be a really good screen. It doesn't take up too much room. It's fast growing. And so they planted this as part of their design around these new buildings. But they made one mistake. Actually, they've done it twice at OCC. They planted running bamboos. And they just started running all over the place. And boy, maintenance and operations had a fit. And so they said, no more bamboos. And so, we have, we just have the only bamboo, and because we can control this guy. So things to remember. These are the stalks, right? And they do at these nodes produce leaves. You can see an old leaf here. So these little sheaths here can be problematic because they contain silica. And you can actually, if you get this little edge on you just at the wrong angle, you could cut yourself with this. So we always warn students about these little papery sheaths that emerge from the nodes, and that they need to be careful when they're dealing with those. You should have gloves on. Anyway, here are the leaves that come from little stems that emerge from these nodes here. And here's a new spike coming up. And they're pretty formidable. These can get 45 feet tall, this particular one. And it's monocarpic, which means it dies when it flowers. It hasn't flowered yet. But every year, when we go from spring kind of into late spring and it starts to warm up, this bamboo starts to look a little haggard. And we always get all worried, get out our binoculars and start looking up in the tops to see if we see flowers up there. And it hasn't, this clump is 45 years old. So we're thinking it's about time. But you know what it is? It's just that it's a grass, basically. It's a monocot. It just wants water. So once we dump the hose on it for a couple of hours, it bounces back and we're off and running. Remember this about bamboo. It likes the water. So we have to keep water on it. It's an excellent, I don't like my neighbor plant. So just remember that if you ever get into a war with your neighbor and you want to be done with it, just plant one of these. You'll be good. Anyway, once the most common of the large hardy timber bamboos, many perished during a big blooming period in the 1970s. It grows 15 to 35 feet tall and clumps up to 50 feet wide. Ours is over 40 feet tall now. Most often in Southern California, we are planting Bambusa oldhamii, which is the giant clumping timber bamboo. But ours was able to avoid all of the diseases as they came through, and it's still there. Most bamboos are monocarpic, meaning that they die when they bloom. Ours in the horticulture department is over 40 years. So this is just for your information. If you're looking for giant timber bamboo, they'll probably try to sell you this one. Okay, and then finally, Castanospermum austral, the Moreton Bay chestnut. This is one of the last ones we see at the Huntington, and it's right opposite the original mansion, right in a corner. It's a tropical tree. It has a compound leaf with many shiny little leaflets on it, slightly wavy edges. Here is here it is looking down on a group of the leaves, so you can see that they're compound. It makes these pods that can have these chestnut-looking seeds in there. Here's one with 5. The flower kind of shows you how tropical this thing is. It's comes on a long spike. It's there's multiple flowers in one clump. Okay, and the flowers can last maybe 2-3 weeks, and then it goes into making these pods that have the chestnut-looking seeds in them. We don't see too many of these. They don't like to be in a pot. Every time we grow them, propagate them from seed, we leave them in the can too long, and they kind of start to perish. Okay, so from Australia, this tree can get 130 feet tall, 100 feet wide, but most commonly grows 30 by 60, especially in Southern California. Compound leaves are shiny and have 19 5-inch leaflets with wavy margins. Bright orange tropical flower clusters yield 6-inch long seed pods holding between 1 and 6 large chestnut-like seeds. Historically, when poisonous seeds were properly prepared by roasting and leaching, provided a regular food source to the Aboriginal tribes for over 2,500 years. Somebody came out and told us that when we were at the Huntington. He wanted to share that with us because one of my students says, "Are these poisonous?" I said, "I think they are." And then she dropped the pod right away. And then a guy came up and said, no, it's okay to hold them, and and then told the story. And so now it's on my PowerPoint. Okay. All right.